So my name's Catherine. I'm just one of the team here at Life Matters, Psychologists, and again, welcome everybody. We're delighted to have you all join us for this much needed discussion and to be able to share resources with these amazing practitioners and clinicians about the subject of menopause. So we don't want to waste any more time sort of with the welcomes. Maybe we should just go straight over to our acknowledgement of country. Thank you, Bradley. We've got our ninja, our technology ninja in the background working with us today. So we would just like to sincerely express that this presentation is being produced on Awabakal land. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of this nation and, of course, their connection to land and waters around us. And we pay our respect to elders past, present and emerging. So without further ado, I think I would like to hand over to the illustrious Amy Lombard. Take it away, Amy.
Thanks, Kath. So welcome everyone. Really happy to see so many of you join, and I hope you leave here feeling a little bit inspired, empowered, with a whole toolkit worth of information that you can take on through your experience wherever you are in your menopause journey. I'm an exercise scientist and menopause fitness coach working face-to-face and online, and I'm going to talk to you today primarily about exercise and nutrition and how you can make some changes and add a few things to your lifestyle that's going to really help you improve your experience through menopause and really just help you cope with the physical symptoms and the mental and emotional symptoms as well. So next slide, we'll get started. Beautiful. Okay, so I mean, we all know that exercise is really important to us, and I think menopause brings us to a point where you kind of go, oh, okay, maybe this is something I do need to prioritize a little bit more in my life. We are all super busy people. You have so many hats on. You're a mother, a daughter, a friend, a career-driven woman, all those aspects of who we are. And it's very easy to maybe not prioritize our exercise as much. And I know for me, it's just as hard as everyone else. So I'm going to talk to you about a couple of things that you should be focusing on when it comes to your exercise. And then I really want to lean into strength training in particular and why it can be an absolute game changer for you when you're in menopause, particularly because I know this is a time where you might feel really disconnected with the person you see in the mirror, where you might notice that inner dialogue is hypercritical of your appearance, maybe you feel super anxious, angry, impatient, and you maybe feel like you've just lost control of your life. Strength training can be your saving grace. And so I'll touch on that later on, but I will kind of get into the nitty-gritty things first. So there's 6 training recommendations when it comes to women in menopause. Now, this is focusing on maintaining your strength, muscle, and bone mass. This is particularly an important focus due to the decline of estrogen that happens during menopause and the impact that has on your muscle mass and your bone. So strength training and getting strong. Then it is your aerobic capacity or your cardiovascular fitness. And this is because cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of mortality for women, and it increases through menopause. The next couple is improving the function of your pelvic floor. This is definitely a symptom that occurs during menopause due to loss of muscle mass, elasticity, and all of that. And then the others are improving your functional mobility, your balance, and your power output, particularly focusing on power due to frailty in older years and the risk that poses to your mortality if you have a fall and break a bone, osteopenia and osteoporosis as well. So it might sound like a lot, but the beauty of functional strength training, which I'm going to be talking to you about, is all of that is packaged into one beautiful, convenient, time-efficient package where if you just focus on strength training, you're going to tick all those boxes. Now, when it comes to movement and menopause, you can split it up into 2 different movement aspects, one being structured exercise and one being general physical activity. So structured exercise is just that. It's you making a schedule, making time to do exercise. That's where the strength training comes into play. And then general physical activity is really how much you're moving around throughout the day. Think about the 10,000 steps that we've all heard is a great daily goal. So this total daily energy expenditure breakdown, I just want to talk you through this because I think it's a super great thing to understand, and it's really going to sweeten the deal for you guys to move a little bit more. So your daily energy expenditure is how many calories you burn in a day. We obviously want that to be as high as possible, particularly if your goals are to lose a little bit of weight. And I know that is a symptom of menopause as well, as you notice some weight gain, particularly around the midsection. And there is a change in body composition because you start to lose your muscle mass, and so you have a higher level of fat. So we want to try and have as much energy expenditure as possible. Now it's broken down into these segments. The biggest bang for your buck is your basal metabolic rate. You're going to get 70% of your energy and calorie burning from your basal metabolic rate. Now, this is how many calories you burn just existing throughout the day doing nothing else. The way you can bump that one up is by putting on muscle mass. Muscle is metabolically active, which means the more muscle you have, the more of a kind of calorie burning machine you are. So park that. You want to increase that basal metabolic rate, and I'll tell you how to do it. The 15% is NEAT. This is non-exercise activity thermogenesis. How many calories you burn through general movement. This is where the physical activity comes into play. And this is things like getting your 10,000 steps, breaking up your periods of sitting, having a standing desk, going for a little lunchtime walk. It's trying to think of it as movement snacking. You're trying to move as much as you can throughout the day, and this is going to really bolster that 15%. So parking the car a little bit further away. All those little movement snacks, really think about those and how you can incorporate them, and just remember that the smallest amount really counts. So it might seem insignificant, all the more reason to do it. 10-minute walk might seem insignificant, all the more reason to do it. The next one is the thermic effect of food. So you might be surprised to hear this, but you actually burn calories digesting food, which sounds quite ironic, but that's, your body has to process the food that you eat. Certain foods have a higher thermic effect of food. So, of course, we want to have some easy hacks. If we can bolster that up, that's going to be a win. And so things like protein in particular, and kind of like high fiber foods, think about your kind of legumes, very kind of like fibrous vegetables. They're going to take, your body's going to kind of have to work a little bit harder to digest those than it is a simple sugar, like a chocolate bar or something like that. So if you kind of incorporate lots of protein into your diet, it's going to bolster this. And I'll talk about protein and why it's super important for you guys as well. The last little sliver of 5% is your exercise activity thermogenesis. So you might be slogging it out at the gym an hour in the morning, but it's really only adding 5%. The calories you burn when you do that workout is really only 5% of your total daily energy expenditure. Don't be upset about that though, because you can capitalize on when you exercise by focusing on strength training and building muscle, because that's going to link you back to that basal metabolic rate. So if you focus on your limited time to exercise, on putting on muscle mass, you're going to do the best you can to really bolster up your energy expenditure. Okay, so now that you're super convinced to do some exercise and you're ready to get out there and you're like, okay, how much should I do? And what should I be doing? So if you go to the next slide, I'll talk you through what is recommended. Now, I want to caveat this first with the fact that something is better than nothing. So I know so many of us are all or nothing people. We have perfectionist tendencies. So we might go, right, I'm starting a diet on Monday and I'm going to be perfect, or I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week and I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. and it just never really works. And what we end up doing is getting into this cycle of, I failed, I fell off the bandwagon, I'll start again on Monday. It's really about shifting that attitude to just go, anything is a win. Particularly as you go through menopause, you don't know how you're going to feel one day. One day you might feel super angry and you want to smash something, go to the gym. If you are super lethargic, maybe it's just a walk. Anything is a win. These are the recommendations though, and this is something you can work towards or add to. So the number one important thing is to prioritize your strength training. Typically, if you could start with 2 half-an-hour strength training sessions a week, if say you don't do any strength training, that is amazing. You're going to really start to feel some differences and some changes. And then of course you build on it. Just know that you'll build a tolerance to exercise as well. So don't go and start with 5 times a week, because you're probably going to get ill, you're going to get injured. So start slow and build yourself up. The next thing to prioritize is your moderate physical activity. So this is kind of falls into that physical activity 10,000 steps style that I was talking about. And, you know, you might break it up into 2 half-an-hour walks. Maybe it's a 1 hour walk, or maybe it's 10 minutes every now and then where you can get it. It's really just about moving at that moderate pace. You really want to kind of try and move away from being a treadmill bunny, essentially. So, you know, the cardio era in the 80s and all of that, where you're on the treadmill running for an hour, sweating it out. When you're in menopause, cortisol levels are a little bit higher. That might just be too much of a stress on your body. So bring it down to moderate physical activity that you can do for a longer duration. And then focus on HIIT and power to get your heart rate up. So that's where the next one falls into play here, where you're focusing on your power output. Literally 5 to 15 minutes is all you really need to do, and add it to your strength training sessions. And that way, you get short bursts, great for if you are stressed, anxious, angry, let it out, ball slams, boxing, whatever you need to do. The last one, of course, is maybe using a stretch session on the weekend or a yoga class or something like that, just to touch on balance, mobility, and flexibility. And it's a really good self-care practice to do as well. And that is super important. So to the next slide. Just going to touch on how to actually strength train. So I'm sure you've heard how important strength training is, but then you go, oh, okay, well, how do I do it? So to structure a workout, this is typically how I would do it. So you start with a little bit of mobility. That's, you know, cat-cows, doing a little bit of stretching and getting your body ready to go. Then you're going to do movement preparation. This is where you touch on stability style exercises. So think your core, your glutes, and your shoulder rotator cuffs. Rotator cuff. Typically the areas that you tend to have injuries is stability muscles, and you want to activate them so that they're moving really efficiently and doing their job before you go into strength training. Because I know, you know, some of you might feel a little daunted by lifting heavy weights. This is how you're going to ensure you are fully ready to do it. Then you might throw in your little bit of power exercises, and then you focus on your strength. Now, when I talk about strength training, I'm not talking about having cute little pink 2-kilo dumbbells and doing bicep curls, 20 reps. That's not going to stimulate muscle growth. You need to have a volume of 6 to 12 repetitions. Again, it's not just stopping at 12 when you have a 2-kilo weight. It's about choosing a weight that is going to make you stop at 12. You want to be nice and challenged. So that's kind of the rep range you want to aim for. And then effort is 2 to 3 reps in reserve. So if you choose a 4-kilo dumbbell and you go for 12 bicep curls, if you get to the 12th one and you're like, I probably could have done 5 or 6 more, go heavier. Aim to be struggling by that 12th rep. And of course, you're doing that in a slow, controlled way in your full range of motion to get the most out of the movement. Okay, next slide. So this is the one that I'm most excited to talk about because I want you guys leaving here excited to venture into strength training. So on the left, menopause without strength training, that is how you might feel. And I can definitely attest to, I'm sure, some of my clients feeling like that way before they started strength training. And then to the right is how I want all of you to be in the future. And I really think strength training can help you get there. And that's because during menopause, like I said, you might feel like you're kind of completely at a loss and you just have no idea how to try and get your life back on track or how to feel a bit more like yourself, because there is a lot you can't control when it comes to menopause. What you can control, though, is your actions and your attitude. So if you've got a kick-ass attitude like this lady here, and if you make the choice of prioritizing strength training, you're going to realize that you can, you're going to realize that you'll be able to do hard things because you're used to sitting on a wall for 60 seconds and your thighs are burning and you're sweating. You're going to be fully know that you're able to step outside your comfort zone and achieve a body weight squat. And you're going to start to feel yourself getting physically stronger. You're going to notice, oh, I'm carrying all the grocery bags in one go. You're going to notice next time you go up a flight of stairs that you've got that power in your legs to do so. And this is the gift that strength training can give you. And just a couple kind of client stories that I hope kind of inspires you to kind of take that leap, and just know that the first leap is always the hardest. I've got a client who's 57 and she can do more pull-ups than me, and I'm half her age. 49-year-old who can deadlift double her weight. 160 kilogram leg press for a 56-year-old client. Another client of mine who started with me with a stage 1 prolapse, did a 90 kilogram deadlift. And I quote, this is what she said, and she's given me permission to say so, without her uterus falling out. And this is the kind of thing that strength training can give you. It can literally give you your life back. And yeah, so many other client stories. One client, post-breast cancer, climbing the wall of China. So yeah, strength training can really give you your life. The last thing I want to touch on, and then I'm going to, if you have any questions, type them into the chat box, and then we'll jump on to our next speaker. So onto the last slide, I just want to touch on a little bit on nutrition. Again, we probably all know what's healthy, what's not. And I really just want to encourage you to focus on mainly protein in every meal. So please, if you are someone who used to skip breakfast, do yourself a favor, start eating breakfast, because it's going to ramp up your metabolism and feed you that protein you need to maintain your bones and your muscle. So protein in every meal, lots and lots of fiber, because your risk of higher cholesterol increases with menopause, and fiber is a really great way to try and mitigate that as much as possible. Obviously get all your micronutrients as well. Focus on healthy fats too, so your avocados, fatty fish, olive oils, all that kind of stuff. Of course, be mindful of your alcohol intake, because you might not be processing alcohol as well as you did in your 20s. Just think about the hangovers and you'll know about that. And be mindful of your caffeine intake, because you might become a bit more sensitive to caffeine, and maybe that's contributing to your anxiety and inability to sleep. Last thing I want to speak to is how to eat, which I think is even more important because of how emotional food is for us. And the 80 whole, 20 soul principle works beautifully. Make menopause an opportunity for you to ditch the diets, ditch the rules and the restrictions, and just focus on 80% of the time, eat in alignment with your goal. And if your goal is longevity, losing a little bit of weight, if you choose to eat 80% of the time in alignment to that goal, eating real foods, 20% of the time you can have whatever you enjoy, the soulful foods, the foods you enjoy with your family and your friends and going out, and you're still going to get to your goal. So 80 whole, 20 soul is what I'd love you guys to take away from the nutritional guidelines. And yes, if you have any questions, please add them to the chat box, and I'm happy to answer them all. Thank you, everyone. And I'm excited to hear from everyone else.
Just a reminder to everyone, you can unmute yourself if you want to quickly have a live chat with Amy now and just ask her a question before we move on. Or if you're feeling a bit shy, you can just pop it in the chat box. And then I think we're going to circle back as a group at the end and try and find any questions that were in that chat box and address some of them then. So is there anyone that would like to unmute and ask a question before we move on? Okay, I think we can probably move on.
Me?
Oh,
Me?
Lynn, sorry, Lynn.
Can I ask, Amy, what do you think about that speed fit sort of thing have you heard of speed fit?
Haven't.
It's like a suit and it's like this EMS, is it? Sort of training where they really work your muscles. It's supposed to be strength training.
Okay. I'll have to look into that. I haven't heard of that.
All right. Cool. All right.
Sorry,
Right.
Lynn.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, so let's move on to the next speaker. Phoebe, take it away. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Cass. Pleasure to be here.
Hello.
Can everyone hear me? Hope everyone can hear me. So very warm welcome to everyone here tonight, and a big thank you to the organisers for asking me to come along. It's always such a pleasure to speak to and with people about menopause, which is an area of clinical practice I really enjoy and find very personally and professionally rewarding. Sorry, I'll get you to move on to my first slide if that's okay. It's awesome to be able to celebrate International Women's Day this year by talking about menopause. I don't think anyone here tonight would argue that menopause is really having a moment. And judging by the interest in mainstream as well as social media, in addition to the recent political interest, I think menopause is finally having its day in the sun. And although menopause is by definition only one day in the reproductive life cycle of women and people born with ovaries, it's so much more than that. For some, it's a long transition, which can be unexpected, difficult and isolating. For others, it can be smooth and hiccup-free, but also an opportunity to evaluate health status and risk factors. Whether you're in the thick of hot flushes and no sleep through the other side, anticipating what lies ahead, or even the partner or friend of someone supporting someone in their journey, I'm sure you'll get something out of tonight. And I already have out of the first presentation. Thanks, Amy. I hope to see that during this menopause moment in history, there will be enough social and political change to really make this life-changing personal transition something that's well understood and supported and celebrated. And I also hope that everyone who has questions or needs support around menopause feels empowered to make the most of the current menopause moment. Next slide, if that's okay. So what do I see in my clinical practice? Why might you decide to see a doctor or another health professional about menopause? Isn't it just a normal transition in life? We commonly talk about hot flushes and mood changes when it comes to menopause symptoms, but the way women and people with ovaries present in my clinic varies quite a lot. The infographic you can see here comes from the Australasian Menopause Society 2023 annual report. And as you can see at the time, there were almost 5.5 million women in Australia and New Zealand who were menopausal or postmenopausal. And more than half of them were suffering or had suffered with moderate menopause symptoms. And around 1 million women had suffered or were suffering with severe symptoms. And these symptoms include not just hot flushes and night sweats, but joint and muscle pain, insomnia, cognitive dysfunction, including issues with memory and concentration, reduced libido, fatigue, headaches, dry and itchy skin, vaginal dryness, pain with sex, irritability, anxiety and depression. The average duration of symptoms is about 4 years. The risk of cardiovascular disease, diabetes and stroke increases with menopause, and we start to lose bone density a couple of years before the last period. And women commonly come to see me to discuss how they can reduce these risks, even if they feel well. And the perimenopause is such a great golden opportunity to take stock and review things holistically. Of course, I want to explore all the symptoms someone might be having, but I also want to take a step back and look at the things that affect us as we age. So stress, diet, activity levels, social connections, smoking, alcohol, the ways we use our brain. There's a lot we can do to reduce our risk as well as ease the transition through menopause. And women really deserve the time and attention this kind of assessment requires. Next slide, please. So when a patient comes to see myself or any of the other specialist GPs at Brightwell, we often cover quite a lot in the first couple of consultations and work on tailoring a treatment plan to the exact needs of that person. We're proud to say we're all a little nerdy and love staying on top of the latest research regarding menopause care, and there have been some game-changing updates in the last couple of years. We've seen the release of a first-in-kind non-hormonal medication in Australia for hot flushes called fezolinetant, or Veoza is the brand name. And yes, it did take me a little while to learn how to say that properly, which has meant patients who weren't suitable for hormone therapy or didn't want hormone therapy had another effective option to try. There's been a resurgence really in hormone therapy use because we know for most well women with moderate to severe symptoms, the benefits outweigh the risks. And we understand in more detail why some types of hormone therapy are safer than others and how to tailor therapy to the needs of the individual. More recently, as I'm sure many of you are aware, we've seen the addition of some of the common hormone therapy preparations to become PBS listed, making them much more affordable. We've also seen in the last few months, or we will see, sorry, in the coming up few months, increased Medicare rebates for IUD insertions and new Medicare rebates for menopause consultations, which will hopefully mean more women can access these vital services. And these updates that we've seen recently come on the back of years of work of passionate researchers and clinicians to really try and undo some of the fear, in particular relating to hormone therapy, but also the medical misogyny that's been inherent in our medical system for decades. Research until very recently has not included women at all and overlooked the importance of female hormones on health and disease. And now we're seeing really fascinating studies emerging looking at things like the possibility of testing for specific types of progesterone receptors in the cell membrane that might be associated with increased breast cancer risk. We know that certain types of brain cells in the hypothalamus are involved in hot flushes and also in sleep regulation. We know that estrogen affects gene expression in bones as well as glycogen production and good bacteria in the vagina. We know things like Hispanic and Black women go through menopause earlier than white, Japanese or Chinese women. And we know that menopause can affect a woman's ability to stay in the workforce, with a 2022 report from the Australian Institute of Superannuation Trustees stating that menopause cost female workers $17 billion each year in lost earnings and super. Don't get me wrong, we've got a long way to go in understanding the depth and breadth of the impact of menopause on women and people with ovaries, especially with respect to intersectional data. There have been no or very few studies looking specifically at the impact of menopause on women from culturally and linguistically diverse communities, First Nations women, and people in our LGBTQIA+ communities. But for the first time in a long time, I believe we're seeing a shift, an opening to make way for people to discuss their symptoms in their communities and with their healthcare professionals and receive quality evidence-based care. I hope we can continue to build on this momentum, help women stay healthy, feel well and be recognised as the vital backbone of our community that they are. Thank you very much. If anyone's got any questions, happy to answer them. I'll have a look in the chat and see if I can see much.
So does anyone have any questions for Dr. Phoebe Walsh? Now's a great time to have a one-on-one chat with her. Or do we have any in the chat box? Let's have a look. I can't see anything yet. Feel free to unmute if you want to ask a question of Phoebe.
I'll be around at the end anyway. I can answer questions as they come up.
Don't be shy.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Of course.
Hi.
Yes. Hi, Phoebe. How are you? Yeah, just in regards to what was the MHT that you were saying that's non the newest one that they've just put out?
Yeah, so it's non-hormonal, so it's not
Yeah.
MHT. MHT, but so MHT being menopause hormone therapy. So it's a non-hormonal option called fezolinetant, and it works specifically on neurons in the hypothalamus to reduce hot flushes and can help with sleep as well. So it's a once a day tablet, needs a little bit of blood monitoring, can interact with some other medications, and but yeah, seems to work well for some people. So definitely exciting times to have a brand new type of medication available.
Yeah. And could we get that put into the chat, just how it's spelled too?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank
you.
And I'll put its brand name in as well.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other questions from anyone else?
There's a couple in the chat.
Oh yeah, I can see that. So in relation to fezolinetant being used with HRT at the moment, no, it's meant to be used separately, mainly because they haven't done any studies to show what happens if they use them together. They do work on different pathways, but at the moment we don't usually recommend them together unless there's something in particular. Testosterone supplementation is really interesting. So I think what I would say to most of my patients is at the moment it's only licensed for low libido in Australia, specifically for something called hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which is not terribly uncommon in women around the perimenopause. So I think if you've got specific concerns about libido, then it's definitely something to consider. It may have other effects in terms of mental clarity and energy levels and things like that, but we don't have a lot of good quality data to suggest that we should use it specifically for those things. And so often I'll just sort of talk to people about using it in addition, and it depends what their primary complaints are, what sort of symptoms are their main priority. Taking it with anastrozole, you mean fezolinetant, I assume? We can come back to that question. Advice for dealing with a GP who's dismissive or minimises symptoms. Yeah, it's tricky. And certainly I hear this story all the time. People come to see me or the other GPs at our practice because they've seen one or two other GPs who they don't feel listened to their concerns. It's tricky. In general practice, you really are a generalist. You're trying to deal with everything at once and cover a lot of things. And there's definitely been an awareness that training around menopause for GPs and other types of doctors has been lacking. There's almost no specific menopause training that happens at medical school. And it's getting better in general practice training, but it's sort of lagging behind. So I think it's getting better over time, but I guess my advice would be don't give up. If you've had an honest conversation with your GP or a couple of GPs and you're not getting where you feel like you need to be, then please, come and see someone who has a special interest. The Australasian Menopause Society has a list of doctors that have a special interest in menopause, and I'm sure all very happy to see you and talk about your concerns. MHT to women more than 10 years post-menopause. Well, it's a tricky question. It depends is my non-committal answer. So I guess it's very individual. It depends on what symptoms the person still is having, how well the hormone therapy has worked for them, whether they've been on it the whole time or they've stopped already and want to restart, what other health conditions they have at the moment. It depends on other risk factors. It's always an individualized conversation, but there is less of a it used to be quite standard that we would cut people off at a certain stage post-menopause from their hormone therapy. That's definitely not the case now. We will consider continuing potentially changing preparations, but considering continuing for as long as women need it. Oh, thank you for putting that link in there, Amy. That's awesome. I think that might be all for my questions at the moment, but happy to stay and answer some more at the end.
Thank you so much, Phoebe.
Pleasure.
Okay, let's move on. Dr. Jess Blomfield, thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I thought I might just start off with a little bit of context about my background. I've had a bit of a different journey to getting here to be part of this conversation tonight. And it really started from more of a personal experience, turning 40 a few years ago. And I guess just having this realization that, oh, menopause is a thing, and that's probably not that far around the corner. Maybe I should start to have a think about that. I really don't know anything about it. And I'm not a medical doctor, but I do have a PhD. And so I think I just naturally went into hardcore research mode to try and understand this a bit more. And I found myself on a quest into research literature, books, podcasts, blogs, social media, you name it. And I think what I found really, really shocked me in terms of just how little I felt that we knew about this inevitable stage of life. And also, I was very shocked by the impact of symptoms, the wide-ranging nature of symptoms, and the impacts that this can have on health, careers, relationships, identity, sense of self. And then, following on from that, realizing and learning that there's actually so many steps that we can take to manage our health and well-being through this transition. And this lit a fire in me. It set my path on a new direction, and has ended up in a bit of a career change for me. So my background is in research and academia, but also startups and technology. And now I'm working on how we can leverage technology to scale the way that we're thinking about education and healthcare in midlife and beyond, to really shift the narrative and turn this moment that we're seeing into much more of a movement. And it's definitely become my whole personality. So I think if I was to describe my purpose now, it's just to help more women feel prepared and definitely not scared for peri and menopause, and really see this as an opportunity to be proactive about our health and life and the rest of our lives ahead. And so the things that I've been working on as a result of this shift are primarily in research, but also looking at some of those technology opportunities, looking at menopause in the workplace, menopause technology, and one area in particular that I'm incredibly fascinated by, which is millennials and menopause. And that's what I wanted to talk a bit about tonight, of just some of the theories and early trends that we're seeing around how menopause is going to be different for the millennial generation. Because what we're about to see is menopause at a scale that the world has never seen before, in that this is the largest generation. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context there to set the scene that what I'm going to be sharing is less about practical steps that might help you day to day, and more about some of the bigger picture social and economic trends on this topic, which I know a lot of people are interested in, and I'm sure you all are, because you've got big, big brains and you're curious about the world. So if we could just jump to the next slide, we might start off with a few of the numbers. So like I just mentioned, the millennial generation is the largest generation to date. There's 900 millennial women worldwide, currently aged between 28 and 43. And if we think about how this plays out over the next 15 to 20 years, picking up that stat that Phoebe was talking about symptoms and impact of symptoms, 85% of this 900 million person cohort is going to be experiencing perimenopausal symptoms. And we know that this isn't just hot flushes. This is brain fog, sleep disruption, weight gain, mental health, and so many more. I think a big part of this problem is that, for many women like myself, there's no knowledge that this is coming, and this can lead to many people feeling blindsided and confused when things, when those symptoms start to pop up. So at a population level, this is a huge challenge, but it's also definitely an exciting opportunity to think about how we can shift this at much more of a social and population scale level. If we jump onto the next slide, I think it's worth touching on what are some of the social and community dynamics and health dynamics that could lead to perimenopause impacting millennials harder. Why does this matter specifically, and what makes this different? Firstly, it's the scale that we're talking about in terms of just this very large population cohort experiencing perimenopause at the same time, and the macro impacts that this is going to have on workforces. Like Phoebe mentioned, the economic impact in terms of lost income and super in Australia is alone $17 billion. The follow-through impacts this has to things like healthcare and economic productivity is very interesting to think about at that macro level. Then at more of an individual level, we also know that millennials already have higher rates of diagnosed mental health conditions than previous generations, whether that's because we have more awareness and understanding of some of those conditions like anxiety and depression, ADHD, PMDD, and things like that. Or, maybe the prevalence is higher. We'll put that to the side, but we do know that there are higher rates of diagnosis around this. And there's also an intersection between perimenopause and mental health, which perimenopause can exacerbate or trigger anxiety and depression and some of those other mental health challenges, and even onset anxiety and depression where someone may have never experienced it before. Then we start to layer on some of the broader social contexts around, millennials are the most online generation. These are digital natives getting information from YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, before seeing a doctor. So that's great for awareness, but it also means that misinformation can spread rapidly. And then the final dynamic to add to this picture is around health advocacy. And this is a generation that has, demanded a lot in terms of better healthcare around particularly reproductive care, through endometriosis, IVF, fertility, egg freezing, things like that. And I think there's a really strong hypothesis for how this will now extend and play out into perimenopause and menopause as this cohort enters that stage of life. If we could pop to the next slide. So what do we do about this? How do we ensure that all of these macro trends layering onto each other, which could potentially create a perfect storm, how do we think about this in a proactive way to ensure better outcomes socially, emotionally, and health-wise for this large population? And I think there's three key areas that are huge opportunities. So firstly, around education. And I think even in the last couple of years, we've seen a huge shift forward in terms of earlier awareness of perimenopause symptoms, the impact on health, that particular intersection with mental health as well. And then also, as Phoebe mentioned, that training and education for doctors on how to screen for these symptoms as well as treat them. Then I think there's another huge opportunity around preparedness, and that can happen at the individual level. It can happen in our workplaces. It can happen in our communities. And one of the recent recommendations to come out of the Senate inquiry into perimenopause and menopause was broad scale education campaigns in the community about symptoms and treatment options. So there's a huge opportunity for, more education and preparedness. And then finally is around access to care. And again, I think this is where technology can play a really interesting role to provide digital healthcare pathways that are complementary to primary care settings, and how can these different factors work together to provide the optimal patient experience, that people are able to access menopause-informed healthcare providers, but do that in a way that is accessible, that leverages things like telehealth, online education platforms, as well as, fantastic primary care in the face-to-face setting. So I think there's some really interesting opportunities to continue to build on some of the momentum around how we are improving thinking about these topics, as well as, providing care for women at the individual level. I guess I just wanted to end by saying, I think, and Phoebe touched on this as well, the momentum that we're seeing now is on the shoulders of advocates and healthcare providers who've been working tirelessly. And I think now we're starting to see that snowball effect. And I'm really excited in a way to see where this can go in the next big generational shift that we will see coming as this large generation progresses through this stage of life. And, to continue to advocate for great health outcomes through this stage of life and beyond. And yeah, would love to hear any questions or thought bubbles or ideas that this has sparked for you. I think there's an interesting dynamic, particularly with the segment of the elder millennials and the young Gen Xers, really having their voices heard in terms of what their needs and expectations are around menopause care. And yeah, would love to hear any questions, ideas, or feedback.
Are there any questions? Jess, you're just doing amazing work. It's so inspiring listening to you, and you can just hear the passion, and yeah, it's just fascinating. And a few comments, that we've had in the chat box are saying that we need to talk more about it openly in society and share our experiences and really normalize that conversation.
I think that's something millennials have a good track record of, particularly through platforms like social media, especially Instagram. Like, this has normalized so many of these sorts of conversations. Think about some of the trends, like particularly the wellness era, that really started a lot of conversations, positive, negative as well. Like, I think with information at scale also comes misinformation, but it has really reduced the stigma around a lot of these topics. Mental health is a great example. Fertility is another great example. And, I think this is already, we're starting to see perimenopause and menopause, being the next wave of that.
Definitely. So do we have anyone that would like to unmute and ask Jess a question, or we're right to move on?
I'd love to jump in and just ask a quick question. Have you seen any changes in workplace policy yet around menopause?
There's definitely some great examples of progressive companies who are implementing menopause-specific policies, or they might include it under their umbrella of reproductive policies. They're sort of including it in that umbrella, whilst not sort of specifically, a reproductive policy. Some organizations are including it in that framework. But some examples are, menopause-specific policies, menopause in the workplace education, and then also programs that are specifically focused on providing more support, whether that's healthcare in the workplace setting. Some organizations are providing specific menopause care in the workplace as part of a corporate wellness program. So definitely some really progressive efforts being driven, not just through HR departments, but, top down from executive level as well, which is really exciting. And there's, some fantastic providers who are working in that space. I'm happy to share some names if people are interested in getting someone to come to their workplace to, you know, run a session, give a talk, you know, create some resources, because I think, again, coming back to just having the conversation is always the first step.
That's wonderful. We've just had another interesting question pop up from Angie B, and it could be something you, I guess any of you could speak to. Angie, did you want to unmute and ask the question? I can read it if not. So Angie is
Yeah,
saying,
so I am
oh,
of an age.
excellent.
Yeah.
Go for it.
I'm
Are you,
of an
are you,
age now, and I've had some the brain fog and
mm-hmm.
so it also seems quite similar, and it's all very much, and I like to know why and some definites. I'd like just is
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I
is
think
there any way that we can definitely say yes, it's definitely?
yeah, we've just got a bit of trouble with your audio there, Angie. But yeah, Angie was just asking that it seems to be very cloudy and muddy, the whole diagnosis, and quite a difficult journey just to get a straight answer. So can any of our panelists speak to that? Will it get any easier to say, yes, it's definitely perimenopause or menopause, rather than just, oh, it's probably this or that?
I can try. It's often really hard to figure out exactly what the firm diagnosis is, and I guess one of the skills that we learn in general practice training is sitting with uncertainty and being able to manage that with our patients. And I know it's definitely a source of frustration for lots of patients. And to be honest, I guess my approach is it's going to depend on sort of background diagnoses and how the symptoms have changed specifically, and it's not always straightforward and easy. We can use some guides in terms of you know, bleeding patterns and things to try and figure out where we expect you might be in terms of hormones, but often the answer is to try some things, unfortunately, and to see how we go. And unless there are major contraindications, it's often quite easy to try some hormone therapy and see if that makes a difference to your mood. But it's unlikely to be the only answer, and, you know, is often well supplemented with psychotherapy and, you know, exercise and, you know, lifestyle changes and things as well. So we too would love it to be easy for us to put a stamp on it and say, this is definitely depression, or this is definitely anxiety, or this is definitely perimenopause. But unfortunately, medicine's not that simple.
Takes a lot of detective work, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay,
I didn't have a lot of
so
hope, but it was worth a shot. Thanks, ladies.
thanks for your question, Angie. So let's move along. Lynn, clinical psychologist extraordinaire.
That's very cute. Thank you for saying that.
Mental health is a big part of menopause.
Whew. Well, it's a big part of life, really. Yeah, so I've learnt lots going through here because this is my life. This is my life at the moment. And I'm 52 and I'm in it. So thank you, you know, for having me here as well. I guess if we go to the first slide, I've actually come to this chat tonight from a personal point of view, and also my lens of looking at life in general. And menopause is one of those big life things that I was not prepared for, and my friend group not prepared for, clients not prepared for. And now I understand, listening to Phoebe and Jess, is that it's really around that education and normalizing it. Because I see people individually. I think everyone would see people individually, but it's a huge well, I call it a stress. In our world, it's an adjustment, which in psych world it's the adjustment is an emotional psychological reaction to a set of conditions, that's usually changed, and it's experienced as stress. And this is why I think women experience menopause it's like a variability, because stress is really subjective. It's our own perception that what we're facing is greater than our perception of our ability to deal with it. And that's got to do with our history and how we operate as a person. And I mean, I've got this, I thought I was, being last in this talk, I thought I'd add a little video in here. But if you want to play that, Brad, this is probably how most people are going along in life. They're great. But there we are. Now we're suddenly in menopause. I mean, to me, that's how it felt. In menopause, it's suddenly a change. We talk with our girlfriends. We don't necessarily have that big conversation about it, but we find ourselves in this completely different way of functioning in so many ways that we have to somehow deal with it, and there's almost a pressure to pretend that it's normal and it's okay, but we're actually suffering. So to the next slide, Brad, I took this I went away in preparation for this course. If you wouldn't mind going, I went away in going to this course, in talking, leading up to this chat, it coincided with going away with my girlfriends, and we're all a similar age, give or take 2 or 3 years. And I said, okay, so let's, like, as my focus group, tell me what is, the main things that we go through. And I think, and going through the research, these are quite common things. So one is very debilitating migraines and headaches. I don't know if this is a common one, but within the group that I am involved in, migraines is such a big thing, and it's very, very debilitating. So my issue, and when I'm working with people, is how their stuff affects their normal life and level of functioning. And this is one, and it speaks to quite a few of those things that all of you before mentioned. So particularly the lots of sick days. Aside from that, it's missing important events, and that speaks to how we want to operate as a person, how we're used to operating as a person. We might not want to do that. We might be very family oriented, and now suddenly we're like, we can't even go to these events because of this thing that's happening that just is taking over. Lots of sick days, and that speaks to our values about how we want to operate as a worker, our work ethic values. And when we go off track from what we value, life is not that satisfying. So there's that impact as well. Trialing different treatments, often it's like, oh, Facebook, oh, let's do this, when we don't realize maybe this is more at the beginning stages. Oh, I'm feeling a bit, I'll try this, I'll go to the doctor, I'll go to the naturopath, I'll go to the Chinese medical, I'll go to the acupuncturist. There's all these different things that is common to try. And not even knowing if we're supposed to, but we're not knowing sometimes which path to take, which all of these things I think could be corrected with more of that education and more of that streamlined sort of communication that comes with research and best practice, I suppose. My job, I suppose, is to understand and deal with the reactions for individual people on these things, and reaction to the debilitating migraines, frustration, loneliness because of that lack of contact, and that's more or less for some people depending on their life, confusion, compromise, okay, well, I've got to be like this now, and guilt, a lot of guilt. And that's one of those heavy emotions that we have to deal with, as long as with the damn migraines and everything else happening. Brad, next slide. A disconnection from familiar sense of self. This is a major one, and this covers a lot of the common symptoms that I think are on all the memes and probably in all the research and all women's experience. That brain fog. Oh my God, I'm going crazy. I suddenly can't even, like I'm giving this talk now and I can't think of the next word. It does something to a woman, or a woman. It does something because you're used to performing a certain way, and then suddenly you can't remember a word. Like that affects a sense of self. Aching joints, you know, particularly with exercises. Oh my God, like I can't perform how I'm used to performing. Weight gain, that's huge. Suddenly we're seen a certain way, or we believe we're a certain way, we fit into a certain amount of clothes, and that comes with, you know, that comes with our sense of self for some more so than others. But it's a big thing. Invisibility, like suddenly no one sees me. And again, all of these are variable, whether you care about them or not. But invisibility for the person who cares about that can be a big thing, because you suddenly just appear like you're non-existent. And a lot of us get that, you know, we bounce off other people, and we're used to looking at other people for us to feel a certain way. And if you're that type of person, this is a big impact on our mental health. Insomnia, oh my God, this is personally, I deal with this. I don't know what to do with the insomnia. And it's easy to trial all these different sleeping aids and all these different, you know, fandango things. And this is one that can actually lead to a little bit more alcohol increase as well, because sometimes it's not good quality sleep, but that's the thing that actually stops you from lying there all night trying to go to sleep. And that can lead to obviously certain things like judgments and from other people, and opinions from other people, and health consequences. The sweats, you're faced with the reality. It's embarrassing, but also you're faced with that reality of, oh my God, like I was doing a talk the other day in a group of people, and I was there and I was like, oh my God, and I'm so aware of it. And I had to say, oh, I'm having the menopause sweats, and menopause, it doesn't match my insides, but I have to say, oh, I'm going through menopause. I mean, it's confronting and used as criticism. This is the one, you know, if you've got teenage kids, they say, oh, great, the menopause again. Stop being so menopausal. Like this is a lot of things that women have to deal with, depending on who's surrounding them. But it's a real thing. I trust you. Trust me. So reactions, again, lots of frustration, with grumpiness. We turn on ourselves, self-loathing, and that's probably to do with the weight gain or how we perform in our work. Anxiety, sad, they're well documented. Anxiety, sadness, and also sadness, but also grief for how things, you know, how we used to be when we get to that sense, that out of our comfort zone feeling. We're not used to operating in this way. Lowered self-esteem, that grief I mentioned, gobsmacked at some people's reactions, outraged. But on the flip side, which I haven't written there, is like, actually, you know, it's kind of like when you do reveal, oh, I'm going through the menopause switch, you get lots of, oh, yeah, me too. It's actually, it can be a source of comfort and connection as well. But this disconnection from self, and the thing is, how we're wired, we come into this world wired a certain way. One of them is negativity is like Velcro to us. It's a survival thing. So all the most negative things just sticks to us, and it's kind of like we're being given this beautiful big bunch of flowers. We look at all the beautiful ones. Oh, aren't they lovely? And then you notice one dead one. So throw away all the nice, beautiful ones, and you hold on to that one dead one. That's how we're wired. That's how we're wired to deal with stuff. And in combined with that, we're wired to keep wanting familiar and avoiding, resisting unfamiliar. And this is what we're dealing with, because it is a change. This is a change from what we're most familiar with functioning. So it takes time to adjust to this adjustment of menopause. Sorry, Brad, the next one. This is one that I personally relate with, because menopause hits you when it hits you, and you've got conditions and circumstances of life. This is very unique, as is everyone's. I mean, you've got those common threads, but you've got all these individual things that impact your reaction to it. But, you know, we've still got school-aged children, a lot of people going through menopause. And depending on, you know, those kids, you know, they might be those conforming kids where they're easy, or they might be not. They might be those kids that need that extra support. We've also got parents who, you know, at this stage of life, who might be elderly and need caring for. So we need to care for kids. We need to care for our parents. The type of work we do. And this is why I relate to this, because my industry is a caring industry. I've got a business, so part of that is caring for employees. So care for clients, care for employees, care for my kids, care for my parents. And this is all at a time where estrogen is going down, and that makes us less caring, apparently. This is what I've noticed and I've read and I've looked at. Like it feels like this is to do with our self-narrative and our guilt, and it feels like a struggle, but it's so important to know the effects of menopause on us so we can get it more accurate. It is a struggle, but it's a struggle because my body's not really supporting me to be able to do this as I could when I was 30, for example. That's really helpful in being able to adopt the appropriate lenses when it comes to looking at ourselves and other people going through this. I found this. I don't know if you've seen this before, Brad, this next video. I don't think you can hear it, to be honest.
But estrogen is the hormone that makes us nurturing, makes us caregivers, makes us want to make sure that everyone else is taken care of first. That's estrogen. And when we hit perimenopause, estrogen starts dropping. And the lower it goes, the more we start to question. Go, wait a minute. Why am I doing everything? Would it kill somebody else to do something around here? I just give. So if your wife, your girlfriend, if she has PMS, be thankful, because that means she's producing estrogen. And even though a woman with PMS might kill you, a woman going through menopause will force you to take your own life. But estrogen...
Anyway, that's that one. So the next slide, thank you, Brad. So, I mean, this is all this sort of stuff, this is the reality of it, and plus we tend to turn on ourselves. And in the absence of understanding what's going on to have the correct lens, and it leads to things like struggling and guilt and, geez, I'm bad. Why can't I, why can't I find it? Geez, I'm a bad person. Geez, I'm not that empathetic and as much as I thought I was. It all, this is, then this might be, I don't know, when more research comes out, might be why we do experience more low mood and anxiety and things like that. It could be something like that, but it's definite impact, that's for sure. So what I've come up with is like a little bit of an acronym, just as an offering, to try and help with this side of things, is flexibility, acceptance, self-kindness, and a touch of FU, to be honest, especially to those teenage girls that says, you're being menopausal again. Oh, right, yeah. We have to have a little bit of a little bit of attitude when it comes to that. Flexibility, this is because... Look, when it comes to flexibility, I talk of this story of two trees. We've got two trees. We've got that tall tree with, branches and no lovely, luscious leaves. We've got another tall tree with branches and all beautiful, leaves, and the ones we more commonly see. A big storm comes along and the tall tree with no beautiful leaves, it's kind of standing there and it's like, oh, I can't move. No, I'm not going to move. It's very rigid. Nope, I'm resistant to change. No, I'm not going to move. And storm's big enough. Storm finishes, it's snapped, okay? The big tree with the beautiful leaves, it moves with the wind, okay? This is going with the flow, whatever. So this is really how we think, our attitude. It's going to be more helpful to choose to be the flexi tree. And I say choose to be the flexi tree because we have to choose, and that is a skill within itself. We are wired to be negative, a bias towards the negative. We're wired to be the no, resistant, I don't want to, no. we have to choose to be more go with the flow, the more positive. We're wired for negative to stick like Velcro, the positive to slide off us like a slippery dip. So choosing that self-awareness, I'm being resistant, I don't like this. That's the rigid tree. That's going to be a harder road. Choosing to be the flexi tree, which sounds like, yeah, I don't like it, but I'll just give it a go. I'll try. Yep. All right. Cool. That's the flexi tree that leads to a better sort of a bit of a smoother road. Acceptance. This is a hard one. You don't have to like what you're accepting, but it's a bit of a smoother road. Okay. So imagine holding onto a cushion and you're pulling the cushion, but you're pulling a cushion against something that you cannot change. Okay? You can pull, and it is so exhausting after a while. That's us fighting with something that we can't change. This is something we're going through. We've got little bits of influence, yes, but in the whole, this is something we are going through. Acceptance is letting go of the cushion, and that feels better. So this is where it comes to when it deals with this, with menopause, and also anything that we fight, but our fight actually leads to more suffering than acceptance. Self-kindness, self-compassion, this has to be more highly rated. And self-kindness can be simply, saying something to yourself like, well, it comes from being flexible and acceptance and accepting what's going through, but also things like asking yourself, what's one kind thing I can say to myself today? What's one kind thing that I can do for myself today? And that will obviously be different for everyone. But just having a wee bit of, deposit into that self-kindness bucket it can have, really, really good effects on us built up. And a touch of FU. Like, I think by the time we get to this age and doing what we need to go through, come on, like, we don't have to be disgusting and, awful about it, but it can just be an internal birdie, to some people who are just like, really? You really don't understand. And to see people as a little bit ignorant, a little bit, not that they could be more empathetic, but it's more to give us as that sense of, well, you know what? I'm going through this, you don't understand, but I'm the one dealing with it. And look, it kind of enters into that, I can't control you, I can control how I react to this sort of thing. So there's a little acronym for you fast. Now, flowers and weeds is something I talk a lot about because in most things we've got weeds and flowers. So if you can imagine a garden and we've got weeds in the garden, we've got flowers in the garden. And that watering can, that is our attention. So whatever we hose grows, whatever we water grows. If we focus on the negatives, which is so, remember, we're wired for them to just stick to us. So it's automatic for us to focus on those negatives and the change and what that means to us and, what we can't do anymore and what's difficult now. As much as it's important to process and spend a little bit of time there, if we only spend time there, those weeds will grow and they will dominate. And that affects our mood and that affects the way we operate. The other option is to water the flowers. And that's okay. There's a flower, hopefully, in most things. Again, it has to be a choice because of how we're wired. We choose to water the flowers. We have to choose to look at the flowers in it. And I was looking through things and I saw one woman with in regards to the invisibility aspect. She said, well, that's an opportunity for me to get up to mischief. Because no one really rates me anymore. So that's an example of a flower. It could be also to, a chance to reinvent ourselves in some way, and a chance to take on a new style that might have been forced because we can't fit into the clothes that we used to. But, again, it depends on what we focus on. Well, it's a new style now. It could be, simply what we're doing now, an opportunity to connect with like-minded women and women. I mean, women. It's like they're a pretty cool crew and we're connecting with each other and it's a chance to find our sense of humor, And it really depends. When it comes to how we feel, it comes down to we've got an amygdala in our brain, and we've got it's got a hand over a safe button or a non-threat button, and an unsafe button or a threat button. And it takes its lead from you. It will not press a button until it receives a message from you. And that is how we are thinking about anything in life. So if we're thinking of the flower, it will be more likely to press the safe button, ends in our calm. If it calm zone, if we're thinking about the weeds and what that means to us, and particularly that picks that up as a threat, and it presses our unsafe button, turns on our protection system, that is anxiety and that is stress. So it's really important to know that we are in charge of the message that we're sending, because then we can know it's really important to know that we're wired to head towards the negative, but it's perfectly within our ability to choose to water the flowers, to put our attention on something that represents something a little bit more positive, because that changes how we feel in any given moment. So there you go. Hopefully that was sort of helpful.
Thank you, Lynn. I love your colourful style of presentation. See, I've got the brain fog and the menopause symptoms too. We did have Jenny made a comment around, just as you were talking about your mindset, around that there are studies to say that less resistance and being more flexible and having a positive outlook can reduce the way that the bad symptoms that you're experiencing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's so important to know that sort of stuff, and then know the mechanics as to why. And it gives us that sense of empowerment. And I've got this, because menopause can feel like something happening to us. Yeah.
Does anyone have any questions for Lynn? Please don't be shy. We have had one just come through the chat.
Yeah.
From Susan. Does the mood
Lability.
And anxiety generally improve once you get through this?
Yeah, well, once the hormones, I'm assuming, kind of settle into a new position. Yeah. But if we set don't forget that what becomes automatic is what we practice more consistently over time. So this is quite a period, and it varies for people. So if we become used to watering the weeds, for example, and focusing on the negatives, that's setting up a neural pathway up there to continue being like that. So just so you know, if you can imagine like a dog running over a patch of grass over and over and over and over and over and over and over, a pathway usually forms. That's the language of our brain. So if we think a certain way, for example, I'm noticing and spending much more time on how difficult this is and how awful it is, and maybe those internal narratives, negative narratives that we might conclude about ourselves. If we repetitively just go through that, we will create a neural pathway up there to support that being a norm and automatic. So it's really important that can extend the life of a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder or a way that we cope with things. So yes, I would think that once the hormones kind of shift, how we deal with it is going to be at least a small factor in that.
Could I jump in, Lynn, and ask a question if you have any recommendations for women who are going through menopause and they're in a couple with a male, and how they can kind of communicate to their partner as to what they're experiencing, and if you have any tips for the men in women's lives and what they can do to support them?
Yeah, well, the men, Brad, I told you might be called on. So the men, that can vary depending on the men and how open they are to showing empathy for their partner. Education is a big factor. Normalizing it, understanding qualities like patience, perseverance, understanding that a relationship, is 50-50, but sometimes it has to be 80-20, both ways. And sometimes when we're going through something that we're struggling with, whether it's menopause or not, it might be that this is my 20% and that's his 80%, or my partner's 80% time. So it really does depend on the partner, but communication is probably the main thread through it all. Yeah. And also, just the warnings about judgment and opinions and assumptions and conclusions in general, because it can easily, I think this sort of stuff, when we're presenting differently to how we're used to feeling and presenting, it can throw our partners. And just having that skill, or being guided to asking the question, hang on, I'm noticing this, what's going on? And again, it leads back to opening up that communication. And for the woman for us to actually be open to talking about it with them too. Yeah, I would think.
Lovely. Does anybody have any questions for anyone, or even just some comments they'd like to add before we finish? Don't be shy.
Sorry, I just read that last one. Great. Men need to understand and be patient during this time. It's a big aspect of menopause for women, because we find ourselves in that swimming pool trying to cope, and we don't know what's going on necessarily. And this is where our individual stuff comes into it, how we cope with finding ourselves in a situation that we don't have a lot of control over. And for some women, that is particularly important, because some of us pride ourselves on our ability to feel in control and manage and everything like that. And if we find ourselves in a situation where we don't feel we have that same way of operating, it's just not working, well, that's a factor. And we might try to try harder at that, trying to find control. But in probably reality, and what's most helpful is to understand that it's okay to give up that sense of control. It's probably going to make it easier. Thanks, Jen.
So we've had so many beautiful compliments in the chat box. Thank you for all the lovely comments, everyone. We're so pleased that you've found it entertaining and educational, and there's so many beautiful faces that have joined us tonight. We're so appreciative. We need to keep the conversation going. And I think another important thing is I read something recently, and it was just a reminder to us all that as we go through life as females and we age, and what's expected of us in society and our roles in society and our sense of self is changing, and we need to redefine that we need to remember that we are this incredibly valuable source of wisdom, and we're the brains trust and the matriarchs that are emerging and arriving at this place in the world around us, where we have so much valuable information and knowledge to pass on to the females that are younger than us and coming through, and also the men in our lives. And that's an honor to we need to, if we're going to be thinking about the positives behind things, I think that's a really honorable way to look at it. If we keep the conversation going and try and drive things along, and get behind people like Jess in what she's doing, and Phoebe and Amy and Lynn, then we can help sort of create this be just a force to be reckoned with, and turn this around to something that can really help those millennials and beyond enter into this part of life without so much sort of fear or lack of education around it. So I think if we don't have any questions, are we all happy to wrap up for the night?
I think you finished off with some really powerful, inspiring words there, Kath. So thank you. One last little question is: will we be running more webinars throughout the year? And you know, I can only speak for myself, but I really enjoyed being able to share with you guys all my knowledge and passion for this area. And I'm sure I felt the passion out of all our presenters and the interest from you guys. So I'm sure we'll be looking to collaborate again and do another webinar at some stage.
Yeah, I'd love that. So for everyone that's attended, as Brad touched on, I believe in the chat box, you will all receive a copy of this webinar, and feel free to share it far and wide with your friends, with your husbands, with your sons, with everyone. And keep your eyes open for what we've got coming. You may even, I'll approach all of the incredible women on the panel to see if they would like to, you know, send you all anything else as far as news or invitations to things. And yeah, we're just so glad that you joined us. Thank you very much, everyone.